Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Canberra AWS user group for May 2021. My name's JJ. I'm a cloud architect based here out of Canberra, and I'd like to welcome you to our session. From this month, we'll have a very familiar pattern. We've got what's new with AWS this month, some of the key features and releases of the month, a number of updates out of our training and courseware, our white paper updates for the month, and this month our talk will be full of insights from Brian Farnhill on Dive into DevOps Guru, which is a new service that has just arrived, as you'll find out. Very excited to hear that one. So, firstly, make sure you check us out on YouTube. All of our back catalogue is there. You can see any of the previous sessions and as well as this one in time as well. Make sure you go along. Please subscribe. We would love to get ourselves a friendly URL, so please subscribe while you're there. This month, so far this month, we love data. We work at AWS, 143 new releases this month. This month, as you'll see, we've got a few really interesting and big releases as well. So very, very exciting month in that 143. In terms of cadence, 143 puts us about here, which is still a fun graph and tracking really, really well. And we've still got a few days left in May as well. So, in terms of what's actually come out, some of the bigger releases this month. So Lambda extensions are now generally available. What this allows you to do is it allows you to run some of your security and your monitoring capabilities inside your Lambda functions a lot more effectively and efficiently. For example, you can have the Lambda service return the function return code, and the actual extension might emit telemetry back after that function return. So it really helps optimize your Lambda environment, and it's much easier to manage those sorts of capabilities as well. There are a ton of launch partners, so if you're writing serverless applications, I highly recommend you get on and have a look at some of the what's new posts for this and understand the architecture of how this works, because I'm almost sure it will make your life a bit easier. Amazon CloudFront has announced CloudFront functions. Now, this is a complementary technology to Lambda at Edge. CloudFront functions run in the CloudFront POPs themselves. They're highly optimized. They've got a 1 millisecond runtime, and they're basically designed to just quickly manipulate requests and responses on the way through. Really scalable, incredibly efficient. Again, if you're trying to do things like headers at the edge, then yeah, go and have a look. It's super interesting. Distributed load testing, which is actually one of our solutions. So this isn't an AWS service, it's a pre-canned solution and a bunch of automation templates that you can go and deploy to help you stand up a load testing capability on your application. So it spins up a bunch of containers in Fargate. It'll now let you scale up to 1,000 concurrent users and run multiple tasks at the same time as well. So if you have a need to load test your web applications, absolutely a really quick way to go and do that and get started. Speaking of containers, AWS App Runner is a new managed service that allows you to put in some source code or a container, and it will fully automate the deployment and scaling and operations of all of that underlying infrastructure for you. Really fast way to get up and moving with web scale applications running in containers. DevOps Guru. So yeah, it went generally available this month. I won't tell you a whole bunch about it because that's the rest of Brian's talk this evening. The one important detail I will add that he may not cover is that it's actually in Sydney. So super important consideration when you're listening to his talk later. Incident Manager for Systems Manager. So AWS Systems Manager has released a new capability called Incident Manager. And this allows you to bring in a whole bunch of relevant information as you're troubleshooting or running through incidents. So bring together the people, the key, like alarm events happening during an incident window. Really neat way to collate a whole bunch of information that you need to effectively run through incidents. So super useful if you're working in an operational space, as a bunch of you are, I'm sure. In terms of that operational sense, our premium support team have launched support automation workflows. So what these do is they use the power of Systems Manager runbooks to help you automate a number of common support tasks. So you can start, say, gathering data out of your EKS cluster or whatever that task might be. You'll see a bunch of runbooks in Systems Manager that have got the AWS support prefix, and that allows you to just automate and self-service a whole bunch of those. It's a really powerful way to enable you to quickly self-diagnose and get moving and help provide contextual information into your support tickets as well. The Cloud Development Kit, CDK, so this was the topic of our talk last month, very exciting amongst all the customers, both Brian and I talked to. Version 2 is in developer preview. There's two big things about this release that are really interesting. So for V1 users, we had a lot of libraries for the constructs. We've consolidated all the stable libraries down into one for the constructs. So makes life much easier if you're a CDK developer. And the other part is we also now have Go support. So for those of you that like to code in Go, you've now got that capability available to you as well. As a cloud architect, I love CloudFormation, and CloudFormation Guard 2 is now generally available. CloudFormation Guard is a tool that allows you to do policy as code. So when you're deploying CloudFormation templates, or indeed with this new release, other Terraform or Kubernetes configurations, you can check for your organization's policies in line during your pipelines and check that those templates are compliant with the requirements of your organization. Really powerful tool to enable really rapid feedback to your developers as they deploy their infrastructure. In terms of training this month, a few new courses. So the aws.training website has a heap of material to help you further your knowledge in AWS. Some key highlights this month is our Elastic Block Store Primer. So this is 150 minutes of understanding how our Elastic Block Store works. It's designed for storage architects and people that have to understand the workload under the EBS disk layout underneath their infrastructure in a deeper way, and helps you optimize both for performance and cost in the way you architect your solutions on AWS. The digital course on network connectivity, this is for those that need the network architects or the enterprise architects in your organization that need to map out things like both hybrid connectivity as well as your cloud connectivity, thinking things like private link, transit gateways, and how those different patterns map together. Again, it's another couple of hours of training there. There's a classroom course, which is 3 days on migrating to AWS that's been released. So this captures some of the new capabilities that are available natively in the platform to help you migrate to AWS. So if you're someone that needs to understand everything through our migration process, from assessing up front through planning and actually executing a migration at scale, this is 3 days that will really help you get a solid understanding of how to plan that out from beginning to end in your organisation. We also have a course on learning how to develop applications with DynamoDB. So this is actually a 3-part course, but if you're either a brand new developer to coding with DynamoDB or a seasoned developer, 3 really useful courses in there that can help you get better at that. White papers this month. So this has been a very big month for white papers. So 31 new releases in May already. So here's some key highlights out of that. Building a secure enterprise machine learning platform on AWS. It gives you some guidance on how to approach machine learning development and pipelines in a large organisation and actually appropriately securing that and managing that whole thing. It's really useful. Our cloud-driven enterprise transformation on AWS. So this is written by a group of our enterprise service managers and a bunch of people that work day to day with our customers, and the customers are asking us for specific guidance on how to help them transform their organisation as they migrate to cloud. So what this white paper does is bring together a bunch of the learnings and a bunch of our best practices about doing enterprise transformation on a cloud journey all into one place. The next one is actually an addendum to an existing white paper, but if the privacy considerations of running your cloud workload are important to you, what this does is white paper covers off the different state and territory considerations as a part of that. So if that sort of compliance is your thing, absolutely a useful white paper. And the last one this month is the Security and Code Guru Profiler. The main reason I've called this out is that it's authored by none other than our very own Brian Farnhill, who runs the user group. So him and a few of his colleagues have put together this excellent white paper. And what you can do is think of this as your one-stop shop about where to think all aspects of security in Amazon Code Guru Profiler. So they've collated a whole bunch of different information from various sources and really made it in a nice, simple way to digest and help get the most out of your Code Guru Profiler environments. And with that, speaking of Brian, I will hand over now to our main talk, which is Dive into DevOps Guru. So just 1 second and Brian will be here.
Alrighty, thank you, JJ. Good evening, everyone. Always nice to not be the opening act and into the main presentation. So for those of you who are not regular viewers of the user group and have no idea who I am, hi, I'm Brian. And tonight I'm going to take you through an introduction to a service that's just gone generally available. It's Amazon DevOps Guru. So for way of background, I'm a developer specialist solutions architect based here in Canberra, and I work in the public sector team at AWS. So I talk to a lot of different government customers about how they run their workloads, build applications, and do pretty much anything that smells like DevOps is the way I pitch it. So before I dive into specifically what DevOps Guru does, I want to give a little bit of background around sort of how we got to the point of needing this new service to exist. And the story begins by having a look at the challenges and different scenarios that we see IT operations teams in today. Some organizations will work with a centralized IT function. So I know that in the context of my customers that I'm working with in different government departments, this is a pretty common pattern. You'll have an IT team that's responsible for a lot of the provisioning and operations and maintenance of all the different IT systems that are consumed by the organization. Some larger organizations tend to work with global IT teams, same sort of concept, but at a much bigger scale. And this becomes more interesting because you might be looking at systems that are running in different geographies, and sort of how you want to pull those together from an operations sense has a different set of challenges. At the other end of that spectrum, we see some customers starting to work with more app-focused IT teams. And this is taking that concept of centralizing IT and really breaking it out and putting your IT operations people in the teams that are building the applications. So this sort of works really well when we contemplate things like microservices and what a sort of modern application architecture looks like. Now, all three of these have their own different sort of challenges around how to effectively do operations and specifically how that looks in the cloud. If we start to quantify some of the common challenges that we see across all three of these, though, there's a few key themes that we could call out. First of all, the volume of data. The amount of data that is being collected in terms of operational activities is growing and growing. This is also a factor of things like microservices architectures again, where what I used to have was a monolithic application where it was a handful of servers that were all running the same piece of code, and I could monitor those. But now that I'm looking at things like API-driven applications with Lambda and Dynamo and these sorts of things, I've got a lot more data points that I'm collecting telemetry from. And so that makes it harder for me to understand, as an operations person, what exactly is going on at any different part of my application. Next, and sort of a factor of this same thing here, is that when an issue does occur, users will spend a lot of time trying to manually correlate the data across these different data sources. So contemplate a scenario like this. I've got an API gateway that calls a Lambda function that then calls out to DynamoDB to insert some data. Now, if I start seeing some errors across these things, there's three different potential points of failure. There's three different points of things like logging and understanding what's going on in the application. So in terms of me as an operations person, being able to troubleshoot that, there's no longer just one spot that I go to figure things out. And so that means having a bit more of an understanding of how those parts are connected so that it can speed up my time as an operations person in getting to understanding what the cause of an issue is. The next one is around new services being adopted. And now, this doesn't necessarily have to be like AWS launched a new service this week, so we're going to start using that, and we don't necessarily know how to tune it. But it could also be that there's a service that you as an organization or as a team have not used before. So say you've never looked at DynamoDB and you decide to start using it for your application. That's great. A lot of good things will come from that. But the challenge from an operations sense is understanding, what does good look like? We're going to put this into production, and I need to be ready to support it from an operations standpoint straight away. But I don't necessarily have good data around what is normal in my application and what is normal within a service that I'm not really used to monitoring before. And the last one is back to this sort of microservices concept with alarm fatigue. So take that same API gateway Lambda Dynamo scenario I just gave you, and let's assume that I've maybe made some poor decisions about the write capacity for my Dynamo table. So it's going to start throttling requests. Now, I could have different CloudWatch alarms at each point in that. So I will have an alarm on HTTP 500 errors out of my API gateway. I could have an alarm for errors in terms of invocations in Lambda, and I'll have an alarm for throttled requests out of DynamoDB. Now, the root cause here is going to be Dynamo, but when that happens, I could potentially have 3 different alarms all trigger in a very similar time frame that, again, if I have an intrinsic understanding of the app, I'll probably be able to connect the dots mentally myself. But if I don't have that deep knowledge of what's going on, I've suddenly seen 3 alarms, and that feels like I need to go and investigate 3 different things to determine that what I'm looking at is actually one thing. So these challenges and these contexts are what led us to create a new service called Amazon DevOps Guru. So DevOps Guru is a machine learning powered cloud operations service, and it's designed to help you improve the availability of your applications. So what it does is it goes through and looks at a whole bunch of different data sources in your account and helps detect operational issues as they're happening so that you can then go and remediate those faster to overall reduce your downtime. And the really great thing about this is that you don't need to know anything about machine learning other than machine learning is cool. The service does it all for you. You don't need to know how to train models or do anything like that. So, hey, this sounds really interesting, Brian, but sell me a little more on why I would be interested in this. Sure. Let me take you through the benefits of what customers are telling us about DevOps Guru. First of all, that you don't need to know machine learning. It is very easy to use. You can enable it with just a handful of mouse clicks, and within a few hours, your first recommendations will start churning out based on data that's in your account. Next is the way it automatically detects operational issues. So it essentially is going to continuously analyze all of the different data feeds that it's going to be looking at and bringing together those disparate sources. So where I've got an application that's got API gateways and Lambdas and Dynamos, being able to look at those metrics as one whole to be able to determine when there's an issue that impacts the application, not just an issue with a specific metric. Now, all of this leads into quicker resolution. Now, understanding connected issues is one really good thing about DevOps Guru, but the next thing that will really help speed this up for you is we go beyond just here's an issue that we see that has connected metrics. We'll give you recommendations on how to fix it. And those recommendations are going to be very context driven. So we'll look at the metrics and regular behavior in your applications, but we're also taking in a number of different data points, particularly things from what's happening in your CloudFormation templates, as well as what's happened in CloudTrail. So say, for example, I deployed an update to my CloudFormation template that lowered the write capacity on that DynamoDB table in my example scenario here. What DevOps Guru will do is it'll say, hey, I see these 3 different metrics that are all related, and they started happening not long after this CloudFormation template was deployed. So one of the recommendations I'm going to give you is roll back that change. So it's a very contextual recommendation based on what's actually happening in my account. DevOps Guru is scalable. It's another service that we provide as a fully managed service. You just tell us what you want to monitor and what you want to be alerted about, and we will scale all of the underlying hardware and services and manage availability for you. Again, this makes it really easy to get started, and it means that you don't need to worry about provisioning capacity and worrying about how you scale. You just pay as you use based on the number of resources you're analyzing. And the last thing, and this is where the machine learning really comes back into it, is we want to reduce the noise. So one thing that customers tell us pretty consistently in terms of monitoring tools is that the concept of alarm fatigue is something that starts to impact them. They have alarms going off everywhere. They don't necessarily know what ones need to be responded to and what ones are normal behavior, but the alarm hasn't necessarily been tuned or someone hasn't gone back to fix that. What we do with the machine learning here is we've actually trained models based on just tons and tons of data around how we run the services and what we know about things in AWS to understand what good looks like as a bit of a baseline. We then also compare that with data from your account about your applications and workloads to be able to give you a recommendation that is contextual to your application, but based on the parameters of years of operating AWS and services within AWS. So that all leads into to a few different benefits and things that we'll do with DevOps Guru. First of all, it'll help you detect those really high severity issues. So the machine learning models are trained in such a way that we want to present high confidence results to you. We don't want to present recommendations that might not actually be a thing. We want to be very confident that when we see metrics and data in your applications, that we present a recommendation that really does need to be looked at. So we're going to correlate a bunch of different data sources together. So we're going to be looking at metrics and anomalies in those. We'll be looking at trace data, changes in your CloudFormation templates, things that are coming out of logs, and potentially triggered by other incidents in some cases. So this will all bring you recommendations with very contextual data. So we won't just tell you that there's a problem. We'll show you all of the individual metrics, and you'll see this in the demo. But we'll show you all the metrics that relate to specific incidents and how we got to the recommendations that we're giving you. Now, all of this boils back down to getting to a root cause faster and remediating faster. So the thing that we talk to customers about in this sense is a metric that we'll usually refer to as MTTR, mean time to resolution. How long does it take from when you became aware of an issue, or when it began impacting on you, to when it was resolved? Being able to reduce that improves your overall application uptime and gives you users a better experience. So let's say you want to get started with DevOps Guru. How do you go about it? So first of all, you'll go into the console, you go to the DevOps Guru page, and the first decision you'll need to make is the scope of what you want to include. So DevOps Guru operates per region, so you can go in and enable it in a specific AWS region in your account, and you have two choices here. You can tell it to automatically analyze every resource in every CloudFormation template, or you can analyze resources in specific CloudFormation templates. Now, the reason the CloudFormation template is important here is it's a container that represents a group of resources that are related in the delivery of a specific application. So if you've got an AWS account where you're running lots of different workloads or lots of different components of things, being able to say, these Lambda functions and these Dynamo tables and these SQS queues, these are all related as one workload, and these other ones over here are a different one. This is really important in that context of being able to say, here are things that are related to one incident versus potentially saying that if an incident happened in two different applications at the same time, you won't have that same level of understanding. So using CloudFormation is a key part of how you can get those contextual recommendations. But once you've done that and you've enabled it for one or all of your CloudFormation templates in a specific region, DevOps Guru is going to just start analyzing your data. It's going to be able to look at existing metrics in CloudWatch, and we'll be able to track back over the last 2 weeks worth of data when you enable the service. And usually within a few hours, you'll start to see any recommendations based on things that we've been able to observe in those metrics. From that point on, we'll continue to analyze the data as it comes into your service. So at that point, if we see new anomalies based on what we've observed in your previous data, we'll be able to start triggering those recommendations to you. Now that leads into the third piece here, which is how do you know when a new issue appears in DevOps Guru? And this is where we use the simple notification service, SNS. So you can configure DevOps Guru to send notifications to an SNS topic, and from there you can have it email you, send you a text message. You can even use the chatbot for Slack or Chime notifications to be able to be really informed about these recommendations as they occur in your environments. So how does it work? We're going to take you through a few screenshots, and then I'm going to show you a demo and talk you through a couple of recommendations. So essentially what will happen is you'll configure it and you'll come into a dashboard that looks a little bit like this. So, well, hopefully it's got less red on it than what this particular screenshot has. But you'll see the CloudFormation templates you're looking at. You'll get a view of the number of metrics that were analyzed in the last hour. Really interesting data point to understand scale. We'll tell you how many CloudFormation stacks we're looking at and the number of both active insights as well as proactive insights. And we'll cover that off in a bit. You can start to filter recommendations down per stack So if you've got insights and recommendations across multiple CloudFormation stacks, it becomes very easy to filter it down in that view. So in terms of the insights, I want to talk to the two different types of insights that we'll generate. We'll generate reactive insights and proactive insights. So a reactive insight is something where we see an anomaly in the metrics of something that has occurred at some point in the past, usually the pretty recent past based on how quickly we can generate this. So the scenario that I've been using throughout here of my API gateway and Lambda that's being hindered by some throttled requests at Dynamo, that's an example of a reactive insight where the incident will occur and DevOps Guru will say, hey, I've observed this, you should go and have a look at it. So we can go through and get things like that to be able to understand what's happening in the environment. Now, the second type of insight we can get is what's called a proactive insight. And this is where we say, hey, we don't see something wrong right now, but I can see it heading that way. An example is going to be the storage usage on like an EBS volume or an Elasticsearch cluster, or memory usage in Elasticsearch is another one, where we'll say, hey, we see a trend, and that trend is that the memory or storage is going up, and we can see that it's going to max out at some point in the future. Could be a few hours, could be a couple of days, depending on what that rate of increase is. So what DevOps Guru will show you is what that graph looks like, and it will predict the point of impact in terms of when your application is likely to suffer a failure if you do nothing. So again, you'll get recommendations on how to respond to those incidents, but you'll get them ahead of time where we're able to predict something. So having those predictive as well as reactive insights gives me a lot of different power in terms of understanding what's going on in my environment. And back to that concept of reducing that mean time to resolution, sometimes I can even head off an issue before it happens. Now, beyond the data that you'll get shown in terms of the metrics and the graphs and understanding what was going on, the recommendations piece is the really important part here. So in terms of what DevOps Guru is doing for you, we wanted to make sure that the service gives you actionable recommendations. All right, so not just we think you should go and do this, but a very deliberate, here's what we think you need to do, here's the links to the documentation, here's details about how we generated this recommendation. So you've immediately got all of the context and the specific links to things that you need to start actioning that immediately. So we don't want to have scenarios where customers are looking at a recommendation and the next thing they need to do is an internet search to try to understand it. We want to bring all of the information to your fingertips to get you moving quickly when incidents are being detected. But enough screenshots, let's flick over and do some live demo and show you some of this in action. So here's an AWS account that has been configured with a bunch of demo workloads, and I'm going to come into the dashboard first just to give you a quick look at it. Now, a couple of things worth highlighting when you come in here is this new pricing message. So after the general availability announcement of DevOps Guru on the 4th of May, we include more AWS resources in more AWS regions. And so with this, your price might vary a little. So this is an important thing to understand in terms of how we do pricing in DevOps Guru. Now, we have a list of different AWS resource types that we support monitoring. And so what that means is if we add additional resource types like we did with the general availability announcement, and they weren't previously being monitored because the service didn't support it, but they are now, they will start incurring costs with DevOps Guru. Now, these costs are, depending on what region you're in, measured in fractions of a cent per hour. But it's important to understand that as the service expands capability, your bill might vary as well. So I recommend that you do the reading on the pricing page and really just understand how it works in that regard. Now, in this particular case, you can see there's not a lot going on in this account. I've got one stack with some serverless stuff that's been provisioned that is in a healthy state currently. So, that's all well and good. But that makes for a really boring demo. So let's flick over to the Insights tab and have a look at historical insights that have been closed. So I'm just going to flick this over to a slightly longer time period and give you a bit of a view of things that are coming in. So the list view that we have here in terms of the reactive insights gives me the names, the status. So this is whether or not the thing that caused the recommendation, the insight to appear is still active, right? Is there still some sort of anomalous activity in regards to those metrics, or did it spike and then subside and things are now back to normal? It's really important to understand those spikes because, yes, you might be back at normal, but I still want a chance to be able to understand those anomalies so that I can go through and try to understand what caused it and whether or not I can mitigate it in future. So you can see in this particular one, I have a bunch of throttled requests on DynamoDB in these stacks. So let's open an insight up and have a bit of a look through. So one of the things you'll notice at the top here is I have a little thumbs up, thumbs down on these recommendations. This is to provide us feedback on whether or not this was useful to you. So this is data that is taken back into the service so that we can train and improve these recommendations and insights to be more relevant to you. Now, in terms of the overview, I get a bit of a description here. So the update table event was detected for a DynamoDB table, and the throttle requests metric in that table breached a high threshold. Now, this is a really important thing to understand about the way DevOps Guru works. Traditionally, without DevOps Guru, I can go through and set alarms in CloudWatch. I can say, tell me when this particular metric crosses a threshold. But there's a couple of different data points I need as an operations person here to do that. Specifically, what threshold do I set it to? DevOps Guru is based on things we understand about what good looks like in different AWS services and different use cases. So without you needing to go through and create all of these alarms by hand, DevOps Guru can tell you there's something here that you probably want to have a look into so that you can go through and optimize your application. Now, in this case, it's closed, it affected one stack. I've got a start and end time. And you can also see it's linked to an ops item. So one of the other things we can do with these insights once they get generated is we can connect them into a number of different services. So AWS Systems Manager, specifically the Ops Center component, and I'll flick over here to show you this. It's one of the ones that we can connect these insights to and treat them as an incident that needs to be handled. So I can come into to one of my open items here, and we'll pick that same one. And so you get like, here's all the related insights. I can get the tags. I can look at similar items, and I can go through and do things like set the status and just treat it like a normal incident. There's also a couple of third-party products that we have support for as well if tracking incidents in Ops Manager is not the way that you do things. So you've got a few different mechanisms you can use there. But let's get down into the interesting stuff here in the views. So the aggregated metrics is the first place that you're going to look in terms of understanding why a particular insight has been triggered. So in this case, I can actually see that there are 3 different metrics that have been gathered into this one insight. I can see the read throttle events is in there, as well as the throttle requests, which is sort of an aggregate of both the read and write events, as well as the errors that are coming from Lambda. So in this case, I've got a Lambda function that is being impacted by throttling events in that DynamoDB table. Now, looking at this, I get a bit of a timeline in terms of the dates and times that these metrics were in breach, so I can start to understand the sort of incident from start to finish in terms of when particular metrics were thrown and sort of what it all looked like in a timing sense. Now, if I come back into the graphed anomaly view here, what I can see is it's filtered the CloudWatch metrics into the same time window of the insight, and I can see the metrics in terms of what they look like and when the anomalies occurred. Now, this is not necessarily a super interesting graph because we just deliberately ran a bit of code that threw some errors over a very short time. But I've then got the ability to start looking at this in broader, show me a week worth of data with where my anomaly sits in it, or a day, or something that helps you understand the context of the individual metrics in a little bit more detail. We've also got links to say, take me to all of the statistics and dimensions, which will send you to CloudWatch so that you can dive deeper into any metrics that weren't automatically pulled in here for you. Now, in this case, you can come in here as well and see related events. So I can see different deployments that took place with CloudFormation. So in this case, the CloudFormation stack was deployed on the 27th. But also on the 28th, I can see that the stack was deployed, and in terms of the timing, I can see insight start and insight end. So I can see that right before these incident occurred, I had a deployment of CloudFormation, and this then leads into those contextual recommendations. So the first recommendation, top of this list, go and roll back the update you made to the DynamoDB table. So we detected that you updated your DynamoDB table, and that triggered this insight. So why is DevOps Guru recommending this? This is a really important thing for each recommendation because it gives you as the operator context to understand whether or not a recommendation is relevant to you and is something you should action. So here, I can see the update table was detected for the Dynamo table, and then the metric changed after that. So there's a very high chance that these 2 events are correlated. But let's assume that that's not it. It says, okay, well, things you might want to go and have a look at is let's troubleshoot throttling in DynamoDB. Let's say that that change is one that I'm happy with, but the throttling is unexpected for some other reason. So here I can have the links to go and open the documentation and start working through some steps to understand what else could be causing that throttling. Also, you can see ways to troubleshoot errors and set up automatic retries in Lambda. So again, I've got links to documentation there to give me something really actionable to do as my next step. It's either roll it back or start some additional troubleshooting, and I've got all of the steps there that I need to be able to go and pull this off. Now, flick over to another account here real quick, and I want to show you a couple of different ones as well. So again, we've got things like Lambda errors and whatnot coming up, but this account had, from memory, if I switch it over to, again, a slightly longer view, some proactive. So you can see the tab up the top where I've got reactive and proactive incidents. So here's one where I'm running an Amazon Elasticsearch service cluster. And this particular one, you can see that the master JVM memory pressure, right? So Elasticsearch being a Java-based application, the memory of what's going on in the JVM is pretty critical to overall performance and health of your application. But here's one where you can see that this incident's already finished, and you can see that it played out quite fine. But it shows you some really important things in terms of the prediction start and the predicted impact time. So based off of what that metric was doing, the percentage of memory increasing over time, I've been able to say the insight was triggered at the 15th of April, and it was going to say around about some point there on the 21st. If you did nothing, then your application is going to have issues because you will run out of memory. So this gives me, as an operations person, a chance to go through and start actioning that. So in this particular case, there's no related events. There's no specific thing that I changed. There's a very good chance that Elasticsearch was just doing its thing as it normally does. Now, I also didn't actually manually intervene in this myself. The Amazon Elasticsearch service was able to remediate this for me. So this was an insight that I didn't need to particularly pay attention to. But again, in terms of next steps, I've got troubleshoot JVM memory pressure in the Amazon Elasticsearch service cluster. So a specific documentation example about the service that this comes from to be able to go and action some next steps. Now, in terms of turning this on and being able to work with Amazon DevOps Guru, it's quite simple. So from the initial dashboard, if you press Get Started or you come into the settings page on the side, you've got the option here to go through and control what you're opting into. So you can say, analyze all AWS resources in the current region, analyze specific resources in these CloudFormation stacks. So again, you get a list of every CloudFormation stack in your environment, and you can opt in per stack. So that gives you the ability to control what that looks like. The last link that is worth paying attention to here as well is the cost estimator. So this is a really great way to say, estimate my monthly cost for a specific stack or the current account. So I could say, go through and take this test stack and estimate my cost. And what it will do is it'll go through and analyze this. Hopefully it's not going to take hours, but it can take hours based on the little message at the top here. It's usually pretty quick, but I'm not going to sit here and watch that spinning for a little while. What will happen is it will spit out things so you can see the resources. It'll tell you how much per hour the individual resources are going there and the estimated monthly charges. So this is a really great way to go and get started with DevOps Guru and understand what it's going to cost before you even turn it on. So some really common use cases from what customers have told us about using DevOps Guru, because it's been in preview now for a few months, so we've hit general availability, and we've been listening to feedback from customers. And what they tell us is that it's good for things like operational audits. This is I don't know what I'm looking for, but I want to understand issues in my environment. So I can turn on DevOps Guru, let it analyze all of the metrics and logs that it's able to bring in and start telling me, hey, did you know about these incidents and these insights and things that could be done better in your environment? The second one is around that proactive resource exhaustion planning. This comes up all the time, particularly for customers who are very storage sensitive, where you're provisioning things like EBS volumes or EFS, where you're paying per gigabyte of what is provisioned. You want to make sure that you don't run out of storage. So having DevOps Guru give you those recommendations without you having to go through and configure alarms manually is a really great way to stay ahead of the curve. JJ, it looks like he's got a question.
So Liam
simpler? Could Guru better suggest trigger values or over time optimize values to ensure we scale content appropriately?
Yeah, so in terms of auto scaling and sort of load balances and these sorts of things, we will pull out things that look anomalous. We won't necessarily tell you how to tune your auto scaling group. Because the metrics you scale your auto-scaling group on aren't always things that we'll be analysing specifically in DevOps Guru. Say, for example, I've got a set of web servers and I'm publishing custom metrics from within the OS for things like HTTP queue length or the number of requests that are being actioned. That's a really common thing to scale web servers on, and because it's a custom metric, it's not something that DevOps Guru is going to look at and make a recommendation on. Just like CPU usage might not be the most relevant thing to scale on. So there's some more application-specific things to understand about configuring auto-scaling correctly. So DevOps Guru will tell you you've got something to go and have a look at in terms of the metrics. But the specifics on auto-scaling are probably something you still want to understand more about how your app works as opposed to being told by the service. If that doesn't answer the question, feel free to drop it back into the chat and we'll go from there. And the third one is around that preventative maintenance. So being able to prevent incidents before they occur. So in that same example of what I just showed you with the memory in Elasticsearch, or there's a number of other proactive types that we can analyze, being able to really understand things before they go wrong, that's the best time to fix an issue because that's the one that has the least amount of impact on your end users. So it's a really critical component, and customers tell us that they really like being told about things before it goes wrong. Now, in terms of things that we added for the GA release, so there was the initial release in preview that came from reInvent, and that's been extended this month with a few different things. First of all, it now starts watching CloudWatch Container Insights. So if you're leveraging the Container Insight service to get more information about the specifics on what's going on in your container-based workloads, DevOps Guru can watch those metrics as well and start making recommendations. It also enhanced the coverage for a number of resources that were already being analysed. So EC2, EKS, and ECS. There were some enhancements to the dashboard, including that cost calculator as one of the ones that got added at general availability based on customer feedback. And last but certainly not least was it was expanded from the initial 4 regions that were existed for the dev preview into up to 8 now. So the new regions were Frankfurt, Stockholm, Singapore, and good old Sydney. They've also said in the announcements that additional regions will be coming in the coming months. So if one of those regions isn't where your workload is running, then you'll be able to hopefully pick those up in the not all too distant future. Now, it is important to understand the region story in terms of DevOps Guru because of the fact that we're looking at a CloudFormation template and CloudWatch metrics. These are all very tightly tied to the region where things are running in. So DevOps Guru will analyze resources in that same region so that all of your information stays in that region. So if you've got a workload that's running in a region that doesn't have DevOps Guru yet, absolutely let us know. Customer feedback drives how we prioritize roadmaps and releases. So that's information the product teams are very much interested in hearing. But otherwise, if you're running workloads in Sydney, which most of my customers are, you'll be able to go and start using that now. So if this is interesting to you, where do you go next? There is a number of presentations on DevOps Guru that came up out of reInvent when it was initially launched. There's been a number of sort of webinars, Twitch streams like this one, videos that are on YouTube. There is heaps and heaps of content out there to help understand how to use the service well. Secondly, I want to talk to the free tier. So as with a lot of AWS services, we give you a way to sample it and understand if it's going to add value to you and what your applications are doing before you commit to paying for any of the usage. So the free tier will give you 7,200 resource analysis hours in the first 3 months. So I'll let that soak in for a second. Basically what that means is because it's billed per resource per hour for that fraction of a cent, which will vary based on the region you run in, you'll essentially get the first 7,200 hours of those in the first 90 days at no charge. After that, you'll only be charged for the resources that you're analyzing per hour. So if I go and delete a CloudFormation stack and take those resources away, then you automatically stop paying for it in DevOps Guru as well. So you're only ever going to be getting billed for resources that are actively being monitored by the service. Lastly, good old documentation. There is plenty of it in the AWS documentation site in terms of how to enable this, how to use things like CloudFormation to turn it on, what the APIs look like. And there's also some good documentation around multi-account patterns here and being able to leverage that SNS topic to aggregate all of your DevOps Guru findings from multiple AWS accounts back into a single place. So if you're in that sort of centralized or global IT environment, you can leverage that to be able to go and sort of aggregate all your findings in one spot and be notified about them centrally. So with that brings us to an end. So hopefully it's been a good introduction to what DevOps Guru is and how it can benefit you and your operations teams. If you've got any further questions, we'll stay around on the chat for a little bit. But otherwise, thank you for listening, and I'm going to hand back to JJ to close us up for the evening.
Thanks, Brian. As usual, as we wrap up, let us know what you'd like to hear. Brian and I can talk about AWS for as long as you have time left in your life. Please let us know what you'd like to hear. Let us tailor this to what it is that you would find most useful. And we can certainly bring in a variety of different customers or different AWS people if there's specific topics you'd like to hear. Also, please submit your feedback. We do read each and every bit of feedback you submit. We want to make this the best it can be for you. My first piece of feedback that I'd love you to send in is we'd love to do it in person. We know we'd love to. We will get there as soon as we possibly can. We'd love to see all your happy smiling faces in our lovely new rooms here. And again, tell your friends. Friends don't let friends miss the AWS user group. Please. Word of mouth is our best way of getting the word out. So please let your friends know some of the great content you're seeing, get them into our YouTube channel that we mentioned earlier, get them into next month's stream, and yeah, let's grow this little community we've got. And with that, that's all we've got for this evening. So thank you very much for tuning in. Cheers to Liam for asking some questions out in chat, and look forward to seeing you all next month. Thank you very much.